This is Dr. Amadou J. Varmah, also known as Basesh Hotep Tar. I'm here at Communiversity. Classes in session. Peace and blessings. Welcome back to Communiversity. Today, at this time, we're going to be talking about reclaiming our religious heritage. Now, before I get right into it, let's first be very clear. There are those in the conscious community that will say, well, I'm not into religion. We don't mean religion by European standards, which would be or Indo-Arab standards, or Indo-Aryan standards, or Arab Emirate standards, which would imply a separation from nature or between nature and divinity. When we speak of religion and the word rule, as in more rules, religion and rules have a relationship with each other. Rules are the codes which bind us. I'll say it again. Rules are the codes that bind us, that allow us to have a moral compass, a sense of direction. I cannot pick up the teachings of the great Francis Cress Wilson, one of our BBs, Qubtic female popes, or the great Baba Ben Yochanan, or Baba Henrik Clark, or Baba Ben Surma, our male Baba Qubtic popes. We can't pick up their teachings without picking up the disciplines that they stood for. Teachings without rules, teachings without directive, teachings without ideals, teachings without morality leads to just having information. It leads to sounding good and feeling good, but not bringing about real results in real time. So we must reclaim our religious heritage by African standards, by African eyes, African ears, African minds, African tongue, African hands, and African ideals and structure. The reason the religion is so important to reclaim, to remove the Africa out of Judaism, reclaim it back. All of the African components found in Judaism, we've got to take it back. All of the African components that's been sprinkled and bleached within Christianity, we have to take it back. All of the African components that have found their way to be restructured within Islam and Buddhism and Confucianism and Zoroastrianism, we have to take it back. Now let's be very clear. Of course, there's always those, the naysayers of other nationalities or other dogmas that will say, why do black people of the diaspora or of Africa, of the continent, why do you always want to make everything came from Africa? Everything came from Africa. Well, it's not what we want to make such. If I go to the museum, the British Museum here in London, if I go to the museum, the Louvre in France, if I go to Leipzig in Germany, if we go to these places, it's not us saying that Africa was first. Darn near, or damn near, every floor in the museum has artifacts, which we refer to as facts of art. Facts written, inscribed, carved, drawn, records, statues, proving you were first. If I went into the British Museum right now and took everything that has to do with Melaninites, cultures, civilizations, ideals, creations out of the British Museum would probably end up about the size of maybe 2 bedrooms in a house, as far as Europe is concerned. So it's not us saying Africa's first. It's the fact that someone took everything that was yours. Now, biologically speaking, or archaeologically speaking, they say that all life comes from Africa. If all life comes from Africa, and African life was first, then African life is first, then the first chefs had to be Africans, because they would have been the first to cook foods. We've got to reclaim that heritage, that religion. If all life comes from Africa, that means Africans were the first to draw. So innately, all art would have to come from Africa, because the first person with enough time to be able to draw, because he or she, I'd prefer to say she because the mother was first, but because she or he were in an environment that was abundant with resources and food and wildlife, so they had time. When you have abundance, it gives you time to consider the finer things in life. So if Africans were the first life in circa the bones of Lucy or Authropithecine and Kenyan woman and Ethiopian woman, bones of Lucy they call her, if she's proven by their Euroscientists and their Indo-Arab and Indo-Aryan scientists to be the first forms of mammal human life to walk the planet, then surely all drawings, or culinary, or architecture, or agriculture, or medicine, because she would be the first to get cut. She's walking, she stumps her toe, breaks the toenail. She walks past a rose bush scratches her. She'd be the first to have to figure out how to stop bleeding. So it's not us saying all things come from Africa, but we have to reclaim that heritage. And it doesn't just mean saying what we've just said, but it means becoming the doctors, becoming the engineers, becoming the attorneys, becoming the agriculturalists, becoming the musicians, becoming the artisans, things of that nature. And this is why the first thing that they stole, the first thing that the invaders from Europa, the first thing that the invaders from the Indo-Aryans, the first thing that the invaders from the Sino Empire, the first thing of the invaders of the Indo-Arabs, the first things they took, the first things they studied about you was your spiritual structure, was your religious structure, because that would mean the tearing down. If they could figure it out, they could tear down your moral fiber. In the black community today, the African diaspora, those of the African continent, we are struggling because we're losing our way. The young people are killing each other. No more today than they did 50, 60 years ago. But they're killing each other in real time where you could see the video. But the killings of 50, 60 years ago by the youth and the killings of today's youth in 2020 are both predicated off of one reality: not knowing who and what you are. If you don't know who and what you are, you will have no respect for who and what you are, or those who look like who and what you are, or those who sound like who and what you are. When you and I are being attacked psychological, what they call psychological warfare, by way of psychological warfare and the implementation of the psychological tactics that are used is what places us in this condition. So our spirituality, our religion, true African cosmology and theology is found on the Shabaka stone, known as the Memphite theology by historians, or what we prefer to call the Atonism, the original Qubtic, true Christian Qubtic way. True, those who follow the ways of the Qubtic, right? When we can reclaim that which they study to be able to break down our moral fiber, once we reclaim it and live it, then we can re-infuse morality and fiber and uprightness and righteousness and nobility amongst one another, towards one another. I'm not talking about having to do it with outside of self and kind. Now, in order to reclaim this religious heritage, what must we do? We must overcome 6 levels of fear. Again, I'll say 6 levels of fear. Now, what is fear before we go into the 6 levels of fear that we have to overcome in order to reclaim our religious heritage? Fear is false, the acronym, false evidence appearing real. Most of the things that we fear, the failures that we fear, the losses that we fear, the boogeyman and those type of horrors that we fear are a result of someone else's narrative being put into our mind. No child is innately born afraid of the dark, because every child spent 9 months in the dark. No child, again, is innately scared of the dark. A newborn baby laid in a dark room when they're asleep will keep sleeping. But once they begin to watch the cartoons and the movies and get the bedtime stories, which are really horror flicks that the Grimm brothers and them wrote about. Once you begin to infuse into their minds this imagination of someone else or some other nation into the image of their brain, because as you think it, you're going to manifest, then fear comes about. Well, that same way a child has fear based off of false things, the coat in the closet appears to be real as a person, but it's not. It's actually just a jacket. Well, in that same way as when we as adults begin to grow and take control of our own lives as you have it, we take things that are surreal with us. The first fear is in ancient Tamare, the first thing they taught you, the first false thing you had to overcome was the personality or spirit of infirmity, of sickness. Most of us are afraid of sickness and inevitably afraid of death. Because someone convinced us that when you die, if you're bad, you're going to Jahannam if you're Muslim, or Sheol if you're Jewish, or hell if you're Christian. And if you're good, you're going to Shemayim if you're Jewish, or Jannah if you're Muslim, or heaven if you're Christian. The idea of good and evil did not exist. We had ought and naught. So when you and I ended up now locked into this false evidence given to us by invaders who came in with their own ideals based off of their imaginations, based off of having no real abundance of resources and food, to where they're now only mythologically coming up with ideas to explain things that naturally you and I were able to explain because we were around nature and could see it. We end up being afraid of being alone. We're afraid of dying and ending up being in a casket. What if I'm in the casket and what if I'm being cremated and I feel the fire? If you can feel, then you're still alive. There's no such thing as you're feeling while you're dead. But that fear, it causes people to stay in relationships unnecessarily because I'm afraid of being alone. That fear of infirmity. The second fear we have to overcome towards reclaiming our heritage is the spirit of compromise. We must develop as melanated people, conscientiously conscious, those who seek perhaps to embrace atonism, being at one with the divine consciousness that is the creator and the ancestors. We must have in us a spirit of being uncompromising. Righteous indignation, they call it. I say stubborn for success. We're stubborn when we want to do things that we shouldn't be doing. When we're trying to run street and cheat on our husband, wife, or boyfriend, girlfriend, or whatever things that we've done and corruptness that we've done in our lives, we find a way to get it done. But when it comes to liberation, all of a sudden, we're not into religion. We say, okay, well, if you're not into religion, well, then at least the economics, support a black business. While the black businesses, everything they sell is so expensive and it's not good quality. Okay, well, at least work for a black person. Well, you know, black people won't pay you and black businesses don't work. Okay, at least marry a melanin person, melanite, a descendant of African Caribbean people. Well, love is blind. Oh, that's why all the homeless derelicts that look covered in filth and soot, that's why all the girls are rapping to them, because love is blind, right? Well, love's not that blind. So you won't do that. So okay, so you won't embrace a religious or spiritual or moral consciousness that's based off of you. Okay, and you won't support the economics of a black business, support self and buy black dolls and buy black. Okay, and you won't work with or for a black company or black business. Okay, and you won't marry a melanated person. Okay, what about education? Will you at least study the history of your people? Oh, no, I'm not into that. Okay, well, what about law? Will you at least embrace the system of math, a law that speaks to you? No, well, how we know math's the real thing, how we know somebody, well, men wrote that anyway. Okay, what about sex, gender? Right? We have sex, gender, we have education, we have law. Okay, well, at least war security, at least secure your community. Get involved in the securing and elimination of drugs out of your community and the knives and the shootings, and at least speak to the young people, mentor, volunteer. No, I don't have the time. Coach. Well, at least watch on Netflix, only watch black movies. Go to the category that says African American or black or African. Support African films from Nigeria, Nollywood. Support black products in the cinema. Support gotkushTV, Communiversity. Well, everything got to be, okay, at least vote politically for a black politician. Well, so you saying I only got to vote for them just because they black? You see the problem? You see why we can't seem to stop fueling our own Holocaust? You see why we can't seem to achieve liberation on all levels of Rel Sol Web? So that's that second spirit, compromise. Be uncompromised. Thirdly, the spirit of disobedience. We must overcome the fear that if we disobey the narratives of the Indo-Arab, the Indo-Aryan, the Caucasian Anglos, those who by their works historically and presently have enslaved and colonized and subjugated and abused our people. That fear that if you don't follow that narrative, you're not a good person and you're not going to make it. You got to move past that fear. That's all a part of reclaiming the religious heritage. The fourth thing is the spirit of defeat. There's no such thing as failure if you're working with an ideal, because you're learning as you're going anyway. And where you fail or appear to fail today becomes the success of tomorrow. You see, the devil, the colonizer, the enemy, the invaders, they don't fear where you are. They don't fear what they see you doing. They fear what you're becoming. And they fear where they see you going. And our goal has to be pushing past that fear of the spirit of defeat and understand that as long as we keep chipping away as a people, as individuals and collectively, inevitably you're going to win. Those who colonize and enslave you know this, because if they didn't feel you're going to win, they wouldn't put such efforts into keeping a people down that are already down. The fifth thing, spirit of fear, the spirit of weakness. We must encourage people to lean towards strength. That doesn't mean you don't have days where you feel weak. And that doesn't mean you might not have a day where you need a shoulder to cry on. But if you're the shoulder that's being cried on after about 30 minutes of crying, you got to tell the person, all right, now, you got that out of you? Because life, you're still on topsoil. You're still on top of the earth. You're still in the world or realm of the living. You still have an obligation to live. You have an obligation and a responsibility to achieve some things for the sake of those who gave their lives so that you can live. And then that sixth spirit of fear, the ones that's going to be a difficult one towards reclaiming our religious heritage, the spirit of self-hate. The spirit of hating the individual self and hating the external self, meaning others that look like you, based off of how you've been made to feel about yourself. I cannot love you. And I think Whitney Houston did a remake of the song years ago, The Greatest Love of All. And that was a remake, but I'm using hers because it's the one most people will be familiar with. If you do not love yourself, then anything or anyone who looks like or sounds like you, you're going to have hate towards them. And if we can overcome that hate of self, my nose is too big, my skin's too dark, my lips are too big, my hair's too kinkly or kingly or queenly or nappy or woolly, or my I have big thighs, or I have big buttocks, or I have this, or I have that. All of the things that someone taught you to hate about yourself, males and females, while they copped it, co-opt it, steal it, borrow it. Cultural misappropriation, as it's called today. Again, spirit of infirmity, spirit of compromise, spirit of disobedience, spirit of defeat, spirit of weakness, spirit of self-hate. Reclaiming, and if we do that, then we move past the fear, because we know that the original parent is ignorance. And ignorance gives birth to twins. And the twins are called fear and denial. Fear and denial give birth to racism, Indo-Aryan supremacy, racism, Indo-Arab supremacy, racism, white supremacy, and racism, pale Arab Emirates supremacy. But the fear that they're trying to give you and I, afraid to embrace your African spirituality of the various clans and families and tribes, and whichever of those spiritual ways of expression of ancestor and creator works best for you. We're not a monolith. Africa was never a monolith. Find that black conscious organization or black business or black person or black labor force or black musician or black entertainment or black security force or black. Find that which speaks to you, conducive to you, resonates with you, and support it. That's true religion. And at that point, you would switch fear from false evidence appearing real to facing everything and respond. Face every possible fear head on and see it for what it is, illusion, as thin as a sheet of paper. Y'all understand? That's the only thing we can do. And then once we can reclaim it, and that word reclaim means to cry out against, to contradict, to protest, to appeal, to subdue, to reduce. So we've got to contradict all the false narratives that they've said about you and I. Africa didn't have a written history. Then they found the Malian papyruses of West Africa. They found the Shabaka stone. Hell, they found the Enuma Elish that they say is Sumerian, but they say, biblically, religiously speaking, which is why it's necessary to reclaim it, that there was an individual called Nimrod. And Nimrod in the Bible, Genesis chapter 10, was the son of Cush. And as the son of Cush, Cush is Ethiopia. And Cush was the son of Ham, and Ham is Africa. So Nimrod was an African who they say biblically set up Shinar, which is Sumeria, Babel, which is Babylon, Akkad, which is Akkadia, Kelne, the fortress of Anu, the high deity or ancestor within the Nile River Valley civilization. And, of course, again, Babel, Erech, the last, which you call Iraq today, African civilizations. Reclaim our religious identity. Our religion includes our architecture, our science, our original cosmology or theology does not separate any aspect of our culture or our ideals or our direction. That's why it's important that we reclaim it. I pray that that's reached you. And I pray that as you watch this over and over again, perhaps, and share it with family and friends alike, that you will support Kush Communiversity, where we do this type of endarkenment, awakening the mind, moving it from the light of chaos of European and Indo-Arab and Indo-Aryan concepts back to the endarkened bosom of ancient Tamare, ancient African precepts, rites, and rituals. Peace and blessings. Namaste.